Okay, now I need to discuss customization for the system. You know, in every CMS, there are things that you're going to need to do on a website. A customer is going to make a request, or you yourself, if you're building your own website with the system. You'll want to do something that the system doesn't include, and that's true for all of these things, whether it's Drupal or WordPress. You know, Drupal system has modules, and you can customize using modules. There's a very complicated UI for that, and very complicated rules for publishing and deploying modules. And there's a whole API for it, a pretty complicated API. Requires a great deal of engineering expertise and security expertise to use it. WordPress, the same kind of deal. I mean, one of the biggest problems with WordPress is the minute you pick up a plugin that somebody else has written, you know, there's this big question mark as to whether it's going to open your system up and make it vulnerable to hacking. And in fact, many of the worst hacks that have happened on websites and across the internet have been because of badly written WordPress shortcode add-ons and plugins that have not been vetted or you know, peer reviewed by the WordPress security community, and even some that have been bad news. So that saying, I mean, I needed a way here to extend the system so that people could add features and add new custom block types, not just add, you know, stuff, but add block types. So this discussion is really a two-part thing. First of all, I'm going to show you the basic deal about how you create a new block type, which then you can use to create blocks. And then I'm going to show you how to build a custom block for that new type that I just built. In this case, the use case is I needed to simply add a little logical switch that says, am I logged in or am I not logged in? And if I am logged in, show me a log off button. And if I'm not logged in, show me a log in button. It's a very common construct or you know, need for a website that has membership. The back end has its own login system. Well, it's all part of the same system, but it has its own back end login forms that are directed toward setting up people for use in the back end. You know, and it authenticates admin users, people that can admin as a permission. And anybody that can't admin is locked out of that system. Any role that doesn't have a can admin or can administrate permission on their role just can't get back there. So, I mean, so even if you knew the back end and you tried to take your member thing and log in with it, it wouldn't get you anywhere. You know, it would log you in and send you to the, because it would say, ah, you're a front end user, and it would send you to the front end. So, be that as it may, let's get started here. So let's take a look at under System. There is this Block Types button right here. Okay. And then here I have this little guy I've created that's called Render View. And what this just does, all it does is render a PHP or HTML view that you or your engineers define to be rendered. And it can be anything. I mean, you can throw any kind of view at this thing. And views in Yii have their own special rules, and I'm going to get into that just a little bit. It's pretty simple. They just have to live in a certain place under the class of thing they're being displayed in. In this case, since everything we're doing is pages, at least everything that I'm doing is, you know, relative to pages, they live in the page, front-end page view folder. So, and the back-end UI lives in the page back-end UI folder. So if we take a look at this guy right here, okay, you'll see it just has a name, a label, description, and then it has a block UI. This block UI is the back-end view file, and you can leave out the PHP. If you can put it in there if you want to, but it doesn't have to be in there. It assumes it's going to be a PHP document. But, you know, it's looking in the page block view or view block or block view folder on the back end for this file to know what kind of a UI to render in the block add block code, right? So it knows, oh, I'm this type here, I'm going to get this UI. Bingo. And then on the front end, it needs some way to express itself in a page. So then there's this little guy, which is render view, right? And this thing is dead simple. I mean, all I've done is, if you go to the back end, here we have advanced, protected, back end, views. Oops, I'm in the wrong folder. I need to go down to protected, back end, right? Views, page, or actually it's under block. There we go. Block UI, because this is of class block, not page, on the back end. It's a block UI, so it's under block UIs. So here you can see, here's my block code for HTML, an include, a menu, page list, and so on. And here's the one that I've defined on for the block view for the back end. And as you can see, when I open it up, all it is a little bit of PHP code that uses the Yii API, the form API, to render a simple HTML block that with the label path to the view, right? That's all there is to it. That's the whole UI for the thing, or the whole custom UI for the custom block. On the front end, all right, so we'll close this up and go to the front end. We go to views, go to page, and here's the block views, right? And here is this piece of code is going to render whatever you throw at this block type. Now there's one more part to this, of course, and that's when I went in this case, this is my use case. I needed to, render a login, logout link. So once I had this thing enabled and tested so that I knew that it would work, I then just simply went into content and created a block using that new custom block type, right? And here it is, render login, logout link, and it's type render view. And if I can look at this, bingo. Now, the block code is that UI. All this other stuff is part of the block API, right? But there needs to be a special UI for each block type, and that's on the block code tab. Here it is. And it's just a form field with a path to view, to the to my actual script, and the script would always be expressed. In this case, it's in one directory up from where this thing is. So if I go back to my front end page, right, there it is, log in, log out, and here I just have a little bit of logical code. Notice it's taking the CSS from here, right? It knows it's got custom CSS, and it renders it in the block. And then, of course, what it then does is it's rendering this. It's passing it those parameters, and there you are. So if I go back to here, where's my ID? Okay, here's my ID. It's just looking to see, is set, the user name, and it means, because you don't have a username if you're not logged in, so it's an easy thing to look at and see is logged in. You could either create a is logged in flag, but it's easy, just look for the username if you need to look to see if there is a current user. You can also look for user role, and then branch off based on what role they are in a view if you needed to. But in this case, I just want to know, are they logged in or are they not logged in? And if they are logged in, I show them a log out link, and if they're not logged in, I show them a login link. It's that simple. And then, of course, what I'm doing here is I'm just throwing the CSS so that if you define some custom CSS for this guy, it will exist. Simple enough. So there I have, a nice little custom piece of code that does exactly what I need it to do. And of course, it can be used to do anything. This particular render view, I've just added it. I'm going to leave it in the system as a permanent thing, since I can see it's going to be really useful to people. essentially you can, this can be just a piece of straight HTML. And you could define, if you wanted to define the path of its site relative by starting it with slash and then a path to some HTML file or a Java file, anything, right? It'll render that content in the place that you put that block in the page. And of course, I've discussed blocks in other videos, how to manage and add blocks to pages. In this case, if we go to this guy and we look at the About Me page, there's my logout link, right? If I go back to the layout, I mean, this is a simple example, but you can get as stupidly complicated with this as you need to. Basically gives you wide open API to build any kind of content, any kind of custom content you want inside a page at the engineering level. So, and I know that's going to happen, so I've added to the system. So if I go to my layout HTML, you can see right here I've added a blank row with this login link, which is going to put that little div in there, and then my style is going to make it flush right and give it some padding and whatnot to make it look correct. As far as in another video I talked about access controls and how they're all relative to paths and all. Well, that plays in a little here. You just have to realize that any block that you create that's a page block that has a path which is a rendered view, that's part of the /page path. So anybody that can get to front end /page /*, right, can get to any view that you build for that end. Now, the trick is, if you need to role protect that stuff, you need to segregate it out and turn off blocks for entire roles of people, as we discussed in the RBAC tutorial or demonstration. If you go to blocks and you look at blocks, they have their own permissions. At the asset, this is an system asset, and any system asset that displays in a page, with the exception of images inserted directly into content, you can protect them from any role or include. You can either exclude roles or include all roles, however you want to set that up. So if I look at this, there's a permissions UI on the block right here. You can either turn the block off, right? Or you can limit it to one or several roles. So, even though any views that you create are initially wide open to anything that's open, you can turn them on and off by roles, or you can turn say you need to just temporarily turn off login while you're doing some work on this thing. All I'd have to do is go in here and say pending, right? And that link will not show up. It won't render. I'm going to leave it on because I need to log out on the system. But anywho, so, this is just a little introduction or a taste of what can be done here. And I think any of you engineers out there will see the depth of what you can do. You can also do some damage with it. You could, if you tried really hard and yanked really hard on it, you could, do damage, not damage, but you could circumvent authentication rules and roll, like you could inject a role into a user, right? I haven't tested that yet, and it may not actually work because, can edit is part of the permissions engine itself. So, like, if you created some kind of a view that let a public guest or a member change a value in the user, unless that role can edit user, I think it would fail. I haven't tested that, but I'm pretty sure that that the controller that updates that part of the user model would look at it and say, no, you don't have permission to be here, and it would throw an error, right? So even if I'm pretty sure, and I'm going to test this, but I'm almost certain that if you tried to break user or break authentication from inside one of these render view widgets, you'd be foiled by the security of the system itself. That's one of the things I like about Yii. You can't mess with its built-in security engine. It just won't let you. Not unless you actually go in and start creating and tearing up and creating all kinds of weird permissions that break things, at the admin level. And I guess you could break it that way, but I don't think you can do it with a piece of inserted code. So anyway, there we are. And, let me know what you think. Thank you.